Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Today I have Alex Chepurnoy, the core developer at Ergo, as well as Robert from the Emergo side, who's a research and development head over there. And we're going to talk today about some of the exciting stuff happening between Emergo and Ergo and this new amazing project that we have to talk about today. So first of all, thank you, gentlemen, for joining.
Thank you. It's absolute pleasure to be here. So nice to be on this podcast.
Absolutely. So really quickly, before we dive into the nitty gritty today, I'd love to just get, 30 seconds to a minute about each of your backgrounds so folks can get to know you.
All right. So I'm in the space since like 2011, doing development around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency since 2015. So I used to be a co-developer of NXT, the first proof of stake, pure proof of stake cryptocurrency, back in 2014-15. So I used to be co-founder of smartcontract.com, which then pivoted into Chainlink. Right now, pretty well-known project. And I'm also, I was in IHK and still officially there. So I was one of the first employees in IHK. Right, so I made a lot of things in the space over the span of many years. And since 2016, late 2016, so I'm involved in Ergo. So first design and from 2017 also implementation. And I'm still there and since the years coming. It seems.
Awesome. Yeah, you got a lot of experience in a lot of different projects, which I think really helps when you're building something new. Absolutely. Robert?
Sure, experience always helps.
Definitely.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Robert Kornacki. I'm, I guess right now, head of research at Emergo and also on the Ergo Foundation. In terms of my background, I've been adjacent, following, part of crypto to some degree since 2013. When I started, I am still pretty young, but back then I was quite young.
Yeah.
And so, at first I was just going to, like Bitcoin ATMs, finding them in Toronto, getting my first Bitcoin. I checked out some of those, early projects. You had, like Feathercoin, Purecoin, and some of the first proof of stake, and more of the interesting coins at the time that didn't turn into anything, sadly.
Of course, yeah.
But over time, I was watching crypto ever since 2013, kind of excited about a lot of the tech, but I never jumped in until around 2017. And that's when I got into Cardano. And since I had a background in functional programming, that was something that kind of got me interested in getting on more the development side, because I already had a background in understanding all of the tech. And then since then, I've been pretty heavily full-fledged into blockchain. And I used to have an e-commerce business, and I moved from that into full-time now, working as a developer, researcher, since end of 2018, 2019. And so now I'm part of Emergo, working on both some Plutus smart contract stuff in the background, but now a lot of stuff focused on the UTXO model as a whole. And with that, Ergo first, because that's already live on mainnet, with Goguen and Cardano coming in the near future. And so priorities first.
Got it. That makes total sense. And so I guess for folks that are wondering, okay, what is Ergo? I think it's a great question to pose to you. And obviously, a lot of news started breaking in the last couple of weeks about Ergo, so people are really interested. So if you could give the simplest explanation for someone listening that has no clue what Ergo is, what would it be?
All right. So in the first place, it's solid proof of work cryptocurrency, going from the first principles of Bitcoin, but also it designed and implemented from scratch, right? And every aspect of Bitcoin and also Ethereum. Actually, so all the aspects of those foundational cryptocurrencies were considered. So it's a kind of total rework of classic cryptocurrency.
Got it.
So we are not sacrificing anything about security, right? Well, consensus. So yeah, I mean, whenever possible, we are taking care, right, about security and so on. But yeah, also we are very innovative, and Ergo design is based on research. So like dozen of papers published.
Fantastic. And I guess when you look at the news and you look at a lot of the structural differences between something like Ergo and other projects, you have fundamentally a UTXO blockchain, an unspent transaction output blockchain that is capable of performing or executing logic much like something like Ethereum would do, right? It gives you kind of the best of both worlds, and that's how a lot of people, I think, are looking at it, which I think is very interesting.
If I could actually jump in here, one thing that you could or one angle rather, that you can kind of look at this through is Ergo in many ways is kind of a natural continuation of Bitcoin in many aspects, where Ethereum kind of decided to take Bitcoin and say, hey, that's cool, let's throw out half of it, shove in some imperative programming. Everyone loves JavaScript, even though there's a million problems with JavaScript. And then here we have Solidity and this new EVM and account model. Ergo takes a much more first principles approach in many ways, where it looks at, okay, Bitcoin started in the UTXO model, and there was kind of an issue where Bitcoin script wasn't expressive enough. It's not Turing complete. And you can't do a lot of stuff. You can't do a lot of smart contracts. And what's actually some of the research that Alex and some of the other researchers behind Ergo figured out is that you don't actually need Turing complete smart contracts, which means you don't need smart contracts that can do anything and have infinite loops. But you need to have contracts that across multiple transactions are Turing complete.
Right.
So that means maybe not in one contract or in one transaction everything happens, but maybe you can split it into 2 or 3. And because of that, you can get a lot of more benefits in static analysis, and also the way you program in the UTXO model becomes a lot more specific, where instead of in Ethereum, you define functions, which is kind of a standard way of programming.
Yep.
In Ergo, in the UTXO model, and in Plutus soon too, what you do is you specify valid transactions. And so your contract says you can only spend this UTXO if X, Y, Z all are true. If any of those are not true, then it doesn't work. And so this specificity means you have a very declarative form of writing your contracts. And so it's a different model, but it also gives you some new benefits, and it kind of brings along the whole idea of Bitcoin in some ways proof of work as well. And also proof of work is using Autolycos, which is a new proof of work that Alex and some of the other researchers came up with that's pool resistant. And so it tries to take some of the original wishes and desires of Bitcoin, extends them all, and then keeps that whole UTXO base, and also adds privacy on top. And so you have Sigma protocols, which provide native ring signatures in your smart contracts. And that's actually really, really cool. And it's one of the things that personally drew me to Ergo, is that it's the first blockchain on Earth that I know of that you can have a very cheap and efficient privacy in your smart contracts. It's not $300 or $26 on Ethereum that no one's ever going to use because it's cost too much, but it's actually usable for 25 cents.
Yeah, no, I think that kind of thing is extremely powerful. And I think the space has been begging for, in a lot of ways, a project to take a lot of the components that are out there in different ways and then rethink them and put them all into one place. And so that's what originally drew me for as a research topic for myself, drew me to Ergo to try and, have you guys on the show for sure.
Let me add 2 cents about contracts. When designing contracts, DEO already happened, 2016. Right, and it was already pretty clear that Ethereum, which is not very friendly to blockchain scalability, so useful smart contracts in Ethereum, right? So basically financial contracts back then, and now DeFi is even more static, right? And so how to make those 99% of useful Ethereum contracts, but with a simple approach, right? And more secure, and so more cautious also. Because Ethereum's approach, so it was pretty clear even back then, but it could be pretty problematic. Right, so the idea was, even if we cannot implement 1% of some contracts, that's okay, right? So we can have better blockchain, right? And so we tried many contracts, we have many examples, right, of financial applications and more, and it seems we can pretty much replicate almost all the known Ethereum contracts on the blockchain.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a dangerous approach to, especially as a protocol developer in this space, to try and make your blockchain, at least today, do everything, right? Saying like this blockchain needs to be the one thing that does everything, because I think when you focus on that, you lose a lot of you lose track of a lot of different metrics and a lot of different things that you can implement to make your protocol better. And I don't think that there's going to be a need for single protocols to do everything, right? I think that there will probably be multiple protocols that, take advantage of different niches and different elements out there in the space. And so I think when people focus in on the 1% that a protocol might not be able to do, I think you lose track of some of the real benefits that come from protocols like Ergo. But I think beyond that, you look at Ergo and you look at the fundamentals, and Robert, you touched on this a little bit before, but one of the biggest dangers of DeFi, which actually in my mind is a fantastic thing for the space overall, right, is to have these really inventive new ways of facilitating financial structures and instruments and transactions. But on Ethereum, two problems. One is it's very expensive to operate and as a user to absorb the cost of making transactions. But also, coming from someone who does a lot of Solidity programming myself, no matter how hard you work, and even if you get that third-party audit, you can fall into a trapdoor and find unintended consequences in your code, right? And that is something that I don't think long-term people will be comfortable with as more and more money flows into DeFi-like applications. So is that a place that Ergo is looking to play in that DeFi space?
Yeah. In the DeFi space, that's actually the very first next step we're going into. But I also wanted to touch on one comment you made before we go into that. In regards to getting that audit, and you never know for sure that everything's safe. One thing that's also really exciting for me, and another thing that drew me into Ergo, because I got into the community on the first day of the mainnet, and so I'm there from the beginning, but not before, when it was just in the test nets and prior to that. But one thing that really drew me is that with Ergo script, it's essentially a subset of Scala, the programming language. And one thing that's available in the Scala ecosystem is something called Stainless. And Stainless is a formal verification framework. And so since we have Ergo script and the UTXO model, which makes our smart contracts in some ways a lot simpler, since you don't have Turing completeness in one contract, in one transaction, but across transactions, this means the state space to formally verify automatically is much smaller. And so what that means is that we can actually have these automatic verification tools integrate into Ergo script, and then we can actually make claims. And so this is why I think 3 months after the mainnet launched, prior to mainnet launch, Alex and I think a few other people wrote a basic crowdfunding smart contract. And it was pretty simple, I think, around 18 lines of code. Not too bad.
Yep.
And I think 3 months after mainnet, the stainless integration got finished to a good enough degree to verify simpler smart contracts. And in 3 months after mainnet launch, we had a formally verified crowdfunding smart contract live on mainnet. That was pretty exciting. And I think the fact that we have that much power already is really indicative that there's a lot more to this model and to this approach that, with Ethereum, they already have some formal verification tooling and it's getting there. But how old is that ecosystem, right?
Right.
And it's still not that simple. And there's a lot of barriers. And so I think, as we go into this new wave of UTXO-based blockchains, first with Ergo, Cardano, and who knows what's next.
Right.
I think we're going to start to see a whole new shift in that direction. And a lot of the benefits aren't entirely clear yet because it's just an entire new direction. And there's a lot to be found, and that's exciting. And so I think over the next coming months, and as now we're moving into DeFi, as you mentioned earlier, we're really going to start to understand the problem space, what new benefits are available to us as we begin to jump into creating new DeFi protocols and building all this core DeFi infrastructure on these UTXO-based blockchains.
Awesome. Yeah, and I guess you started hitting on it there with the tooling. Like, what tooling is available to make smart contract developers, or even to an extent application developers a layer above that, make their lives easier and make it easier to build functional, predictable applications on something like Ergo. That being said, I think the biggest news that really drove a lot of people to check out Ergo in the first place was this, the talk about Oracle pools. So this structure in place with Ergo and Ergo tooling around oracles, which of course with Chainlink and Band and Teller and all these other projects getting so much attention these days. Did you guys lay out what the core value prop is, the core difference between what this Oracle pools from Ergo is and the projects that are out there today?
Sure. So, put simply, oracles, in most cases, don't need a token. And I'll just start off with saying that, in that it's great that some other projects like Chainlink have a token, but in many cases, it's a barrier rather than an asset.
Fair.
And so just from the get-go, one of the first things when building oracles on Ergo, it was just we were talking and we said, hey, we don't need to do an ICO. We don't need to raise millions of dollars. We want to build stuff that works. And what we need, especially as we're going into DeFi, are data feeds. And it's cool that you can have very complex oracles that, can do arbitrary API fetches dynamically or do some computation for you, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a really cool part of Chainlink and all these other projects. But in reality, who's really using that? Are there, millions of people waiting in line for that? Maybe in 10 years, when we really need all this interoperability, we'll need that. But right now, everyone's just pretty much focusing on DeFi. And what does DeFi need? Data feeds.
Yep.
And so with that said, we then looked into, okay, how is Chainlink and all these other projects, how are they doing data feeds? And you have a lot of interesting approaches. And the fact of the matter is, most people just have a few big parties, centralized actors, and they all just post data on chain, and you have some sort of accumulation smart contract that calls all the other oracles. It pays them, it takes their data, and hopefully the oracles post on time because there's no disincentives or anything, and then it just accumulates their data. And then there's, other interesting systems, like, for example, UMA. And so there's a lot of other research that we're also doing in the background, which I won't get too deep into. But essentially, what we're trying to do is we're looking at the basic problem of, okay, we want to have data feeds that work. If we want data feeds that work, we need to put incentives, disincentives, and get a consensus. The basic accumulation contracts for oracles that's typically used in Ethereum don't really have disincentives, and they don't really have this concept of the consensus where you must have multiple people agreeing to like some average that's close together in order for them to be the new finalized data points. And so oracle pools are the concept of, let's have strict time divided into epochs so that oracles must host within that time. And if they don't, then they get stake slashed, they have disincentives, there's governance in place, and having this base framework of actual time and oracles who are tied together in a pool. So they're actual entities, which is less liable to Sybil attacks. Because let's say, you, me, Alex, and 3 other people we know create an oracle pool. We market that, kind of like a stake pool in Cardano. We have a reputation to uphold. And then we can also add stake slashing, collateral. And then we can add all these checks and balances so that we can start to actually have some assurance, other than saying, hey, this is some big centralized trusted company. Let's hope that they don't cheat, they don't sell out, And the fact is also, sorry if I'm rambling, feel free to stop me.
Not at all.
But one problem too is with a lot of the accumulation contracts approach on Ethereum is that they're requiring these centralized actors. And because they don't have incentives, disincentives, or governance, it pretty much impedes any small actors from running their own oracles or taking part in this. And so one other goal of oracle pools is to make this more decentralized and for the more average people who may want to start a business or maybe who have maybe a small business already and they can host their own hardware, they have the technical ability, and they can actually set up oracles and they're trusted, but maybe they don't have $500 million. They're not some major global corporation, but they're still trusted figures. And having oracle pools allows them to have a framework that they can work with other people who they can then make an oracle pool with themselves.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I guess, looking at, again, it's like the ability to look back at what's been built and how things have been structured and being able to reimagine those things with the problems fixed as you see it from an engineering side. And I guess, Alex, specifically for you, having been involved in Chainlink, I think you talked about that earlier, what became Chainlink, smart contract. Did that experience sort of inform in any way how this oracle pool structure came to be?
Oh, so I was there when it was smartcontract.com, right?
Yep.
Back in 2014-15. And so it wasn't about oracle pools back then. So the idea back then was to have some decentralized network to execute kind of real-world smart contracts, right? So, so the scope was narrowed to just oracles, right? But initially it was about executive contracts, right? Some decentralized network, and it was before the Ethereum mainnet launch, right? So, there wasn't possibility to execute some general purpose smart contracts. And then, so then smartcontract.com pivoted to Chainlink, right, to solve the oracle's problem because, when we are executing contracts on real world data, right, so, the only problem we have, the most significant one at least, is about oracles, right? So, it's the very hard problem, right? So, we investigated solutions back then. So, since 2015, right? So the problem is very hard, but it's also very much needed, right, to deliver real world data on the blockchain. And basically all the Ethereum DeFi is working around pricing data, right? At least delivered by oracles, and then so this data is becoming very, very critical to all the financial applications now holding billions of USD.
Yeah, definitely.
Right,
I mean, it's a huge risk if your feeds are wrong. Massive.
And we already had some incidents, right, about that. I can't tell you about modern Chainlink, right? Because I was there 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
But yeah, I believe the problems in the space are pretty much the same, right? And yeah, so what can we do is just improving oracles, right? By improving agreement protocols between oracles, right? And by also improving governance costs, right? And so on, so on. And, yeah, also watch our incidents happening with oracles, right? So working with feedback loop to improve them.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So I guess the last place that I wanted to go is to talk about what's next, right? When there's been a lot of talk in general about how different blockchain protocols are moving forward, right? You have Cardano that's going towards implementing smart contracts with this next Goguen development epic. And you have a whole bunch of stuff going on in the space. What's next for Ergo? It's in mainnet, and you have Oracle pools announced. There's been talk about some zero knowledge and other privacy features built on top. What's next?
All right. So, as I said, Oracle's in the core of all the DeFi applications, right? So then we are going to build DeFi applications, right?
Nice.
That's why Oracle tools were built in the first place, right? So not to be a kind of toy, right? To play, but yeah, to build some real DeFi applications. So yeah, stay tuned. Some announcements are coming about that, and so about privacy preserving applications, right, on top of Ergo. So we already have two working on the mainnet, so some real applications with UI, pretty good UI to me, so you can try them also. So the first application is a non-interactive mixer, right, which is giving you better privacy than in Bitcoin, maybe comparable with early Monero at the moment. All right, and so developers, anonymous developers, in this case, improving the mixer, right? So it's based on a published paper. It's pretty simple and cheap and pretty efficient mixer, and also non-interactive. So we are avoiding problems happening with coin join and other protocols, right? So you need to trust some coordinator, and you have a lot of issues with surveillance done our off-chain channels, right? So your channel to the coordinator, right? Then you need to trust this coordinator, and then some active attacks on the mixer also much simpler, right? So in case of our mixer, so it's non-interactive, so you just working with the blockchain directly, right? And your mixing set is on the blockchain also. So it's potentially much larger than in case of CoinJoin. Okay, another application is called Sdk Treasury. This is kind of joint spending tool, right? So for example, three of us can send some funds, right? On the blockchain, our ring is visible, right? But we can set some spending condition, like 2 or 3 out of 3 quorum is needed, right, in order to spend the funds. And then, so it's preserving privacy. So from observing the blockchain, it's not possible to say who those 2 gentlemen which actually signed a spending. Right, so it's preserving privacy of joint spendings, and it can be a building block for some other applications.
Yeah, it's exciting stuff.
And and also we in Ergo Foundation also thinking to use it to pay out grants, for example, right? With preserving privacy, who actually approved a grant, right? So to avoid then some questions, why a certain person did what in one certain way. Okay, so to approve or to reject. So yeah, I think well, more applications will come in future, like maybe some privacy preserved auctions, right? So privacy preserved voting procedures when we have kind of DAOs, right? With privacy preserved voting on the blockchain.
Right.
So yeah, but there are two applications you can play already with. So yeah,
exciting stuff. I'll link that stuff below for folks. Yeah, I was clicking around and playing around with it, and I'll share that with folks that are watching. So if you want to try it out, you can do so. But really, really cool stuff, and I'll be following closely, looking out for those announcements. I know you said there's a couple things coming, so I'll keep my eyes peeled for that stuff. And I obviously want to thank you guys for joining, and being mindful of folks' time. I also am very excited by the fact that more people can start to learn about what Ergo has to offer, and we should definitely do this again as things develop and get the word out about more of the stuff that Ergo is working on.
Oh, thanks a lot. I would be absolutely happy to join again.
Awesome. And Robert, also really quickly, for folks that are interested in Emergo, where can they find information about Emergo?
Sure, and just to make sure everyone's clear, Emergo is the company that created Cardano and is now also working in the Ergo ecosystem, and Ergo is the blockchain. Very close names.
Nomenclature,
Yeah. And so if anyone's interested in Ergo, the blockchain, feel free to go to ergoplatform.org. You can check out Ergo on Twitter, Google, YouTube. You can find it everywhere, Telegram, Ergo Forum, etc., etc. For Emergo, the company that's doing development on blockchains like Cardano and Ergo, you can check us out. Same thing, pretty much Emergo everywhere. So Twitter, YouTube. If you check on YouTube, we have also a lot of YouTube videos going in depth on updates in Yoroi, also updates about our latest research called Emergo Research, which talks about all the latest in UTXO smart contracts. And so if you're interested in any of that, just go search for Emergo, and you can find all our social media, or go to our website and you'll find it all there.
Perfect. So thank you both for joining. Obviously, this was a long time coming. I've been excited for this call, and I'm learning a lot still about Ergo and really exciting stuff and really exciting times to be in this space. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Have a great one, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers.